Welcome, Lisa. What a wonderful film. So, I'm sure lots of people ask you this question. The theme of awe runs through this entire film. And you're a Long Islander, now living in California. What was your moment of awe when you came to the Redwoods?
So when I was 12 years old, my parents took us on a trip, family trip, to Muir Woods, and that was my moment. It was my first introduction to a redwood, and I felt like I had stepped into Middle Earth. I just couldn't believe that a place like the redwood forest actually existed, and the awe, which is hard to say when you're from Long Island. I don't know, everyone always makes fun of me, but the awe struck so hard that I think in many ways it's when the idea for this film first started brewing in my brain, because I wanted to be able to spend more time in the woods, and I wanted to know what was happening, and I think that moment and this path really sort of helped define my career as someone who tells stories about the natural world, all partly in pursuit of awe and wonder.
Well, I think it achieves that. So you have different perspectives that you weave throughout the film. Can you tell us a little about them? You have the indigenous community, scientific researchers, environmental activists, visual artists. How did you manage as a filmmaker to make that happen?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but
Okay.
I think what you're saying is that there's a lot of different perspectives that are shown in the film,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
why I chose to go in that direction.
exactly. Yes, you have
Yeah.
the.
So I actually have made several short news segments about redwoods over the years. My first one was in 1998 when I climbed to the top of that tree that Julia Butterfly Hill was sitting in to interview her. Um, and that's actually where I met the narrator, Michael Franti. We were both climbing her tree on the same day. I've also made a short piece about redwoods and climate change that I did for PBS. And so over the years, I've made all these little segments, but I kept thinking that we're just telling the story in pieces. And there's really a bigger story here if you connect the dots. And it's about our relationship with forests. It's about our tumultuous relationship with forests. And it's also about all of these different ways that we feel connected to redwoods. And not just redwoods, to all trees, but redwoods are so stellar at evoking awe that it's like if you don't feel it with a redwood, you're probably not going to feel it with any tree.
That's true.
But I really wanted everyone who watched this film to have an entry point of connection. Because maybe you're interested in science, or maybe you're not, or culture, or art, or just human health and well-being. I wanted all of those perspectives to come together to illuminate the many ways that we are interconnected with the natural world and not apart from it.
There are so many perspectives in the film, particular perspectives. How did you choose that the particular person in the indigenous community and the scientist, et cetera? How did you make that happen? I'm sure you had lots of choices.
Yes, I had lots of choices, and there were a lot of people I interviewed who did not make it into the film, and probably there are a few too many people in the film, but every person I talked to just had such an important personal story to tell. And really, my process, as it is with all my films, is I just, I take a deep dive into the subject matter and I figure out the questions that I want answers to, and I go and find those people who can answer those questions. And so that path led me you know, from scientist to scientist to scientist. I mean, I'm sure I talked to several dozen scientists working on all different aspects of the redwoods. And then same for the indigenous tribe. I talked to a number of people there. A lot of them actually made it into the film. The people who I interviewed, I would say almost all of them did. But I could have gone to, you know, so many other tribes whose ancestral lands lay within the redwood forest. And so I had to like really talk to myself, okay, stick with the Yurok tribe. There are so many stories to tell. But the reason why I did stick with the Yurok tribe is one, they're the largest tribe in California. Two, they are very, very involved with the parks, as you heard. And they have really they're the ones who are really responsible for starting to set the wheels in motion, for making big changes in terms of being at the table as decision makers when it comes to the management of our park system. And so I knew that that was a key part of the story. And then the only other thing I'll mention is the Big Basin fire story was really, that wasn't originally part of my plan, as you can imagine. And I happened to be working in Big Basin, making a short film for their visitor center on an endangered bird. And I was supposed to go on a shoot, and I'm calling and I'm calling. I'm like, why are they ignoring me? I've got a shoot set up. What's happening? And then I realized this unbelievable fire was rolling through. And then I showed up about a month after that fire hit. And, you know, it was just heartbreaking and devastating. But I also realized, wow, this is a really important part of the story that I need to tell about this relationship with fire that was not on my original radar. So, you know, the story unfolds and then we just make choices in the edit room.
Yes, as a good documentary always does, right? Tell us a little about Zane, who plays the French horn.
Zane is fantastic. He's so fun. And he was one of the first scientists that I reached out to because I had read about these albino redwoods. And first I thought, oh, I'm just going to do a little short about that. And then I started talking to him and I realized, you know, all of these different interesting projects that he was working on. And he was just so fun to talk to and he just would like light up anytime. As you could see, he was, you know, talking about anything redwood related. And he's really someone who has dedicated his life to these trees in so many ways. And I'll tell you a funny story. Right after we locked the film, we're like, okay, that's it, no more. Zane called me up and he said, I gotta tell you about this amazing discovery we just made. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me now. But I will share that with you now because it did not make it into the film. But he and his team had been looking for the largest, or not looking for the largest, but trying to find clones that were really, really big, meaning that, you know, they were like an entire grove. And they knew that was possible, but they didn't really know the extent to which that was possible. And they ended up documenting a clone that has 280 trunks. It covers about 1.5 acres. So it's all one organism, right? It looks like many, many trees. It's one being. And then he was able to actually figure out through genetic testing when that first seed germinated that gave rise to these generations upon generations of trunks and fairy rings. Can anybody guess how old do you think that, you know, or how long ago do you think that first seed germinated? Think about it in your mind because I can't hear you. But 30,000 years ago.
Wow.
30,000 years ago. So it's pretty cool.
Yes, that's an amazing story. Amazing. I am sure that some people here have some questions for you.
Hi, I wanted to know if you had spoken with Steve Sillett and those guys that climbed the redwoods back in the 60s that the book The Wild Trees was written about.
So Steve Sillett is in the film. Steve and his partner Marie, which they really were the ones, especially Steve, and then later Marie joining him, were the ones like who pioneered that exploration of the canopy that they knew so little about. And I did a really long and extensive interview with him, and I could only put like this much in, and it killed me because the work they do is so interesting. But and then the woman who's the dendrochronologist is also in his lab, Allison, and he was very excited for me to give her a little airtime because the work she does is so fascinating and important to everything else they do.
Do we have another question here for over here? More questions coming, Lisa.
Great.
Hello. Do any of the albino trees reach some kind of maturity or size?
They don't get very big. I did see one that was maybe 60 or 70 feet tall, but they don't get as tall as the other ones, because they're really just a secondary trunk or, collection of branches. And they can't, I guess without the direct, input from the leaves, they're just not as resilient. But they do, live a long time. They just never, will mature into that same kind of redwood tree that we think of. But there's still so much more research that they need to do on these trees. They started growing them in greenhouses to try to figure out a little bit more about what was happening and the conditions that created that. And then I know their funding ran out, so that research is on hold for the moment, but it's another interesting avenue.
And just one thing, what's that beautiful scene behind you out the window?
Oh, outside my window.
Yes.
Oh, so I'm in the Bay Area, Marin County, so just over the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco, and I live in a second growth redwood forest. It's clearly where I was meant to be. I've been here for about 15 years, and I've got about 30 redwoods on my property, and this whole area was clear cut in the 1800s. But now we've got second growth trees that are nearly 200 feet tall, and it's a pretty magical place. The northern spotted owls nest right in my backyard, and they're super rare. So, yeah, I think I found my native habitat here.
Thank you. Another question? There's one right here.
So I saw that you worked with over 15 cinematographers for this documentary. So how long did this whole documentary take you to create?
Yeah. Yeah, I did work with a lot of people, and you're right, that's because it took me so long to make this film. So the idea for the film started to coalesce in 2018. At that moment, I thought it was going to be a part of a series on Smithsonian Channel. And then I realized I wanted to tell the story a certain way, and so I created a trailer in 2018 and started the process of fundraising to be able to do it independently. And that took a few years. COVID happened. And then beginning of 2021, I got the funding I needed to make the film. But I was always shooting here and there where I could, just kind of collecting with hope that someday I would be able to do this. But I did have to call on a number of different cinematographers, all of whom were fabulous, but it's not usually how I work. But because it took, 5 years, really, until we finished in 2024. There are a lot of people who touched this film.
Another question somewhere while we have Lisa over here?
I hate to ask the political type of question, but is there a concern in California about the national forests? I know in your film you had a state forests and the national parks, but I hear that our national forests are currently under threat of being logged and could be including old growth. I know that's more of a concern for the West. What is the feel out there right now about all that?
Yeah. So, people are scared. I get a lot of notes these days like, "Oh gosh, what do we do? What's going to happen?" We have an incredible state park system here, and at the moment they're still doing well. They're not worried about funding to the extent that the federal parks and national forests are. But Redwood National Park is, it's a separate unit, but it is kind of folded into a group of 4 other state parks. Because, it's like we create these divisions and they don't really exist in the natural world. So that was a sort of acknowledgement of that. However, the deal that was struck, or the memorandum, of intent with the Yurok tribe to cede the land back to them to make a new gateway to Redwood National Park. Don't know if that's going to actually happen with this new administration. That was the postscript note at the end that you saw. So hopefully that still goes through. But yeah, we all need to stand up for our forests right now. They are affecting national forests throughout California as well. And the thing that I keep telling people is, just like we saw how people came together, in the late 1800s to save Big Basin and then continually save all of those redwood parks, that's what we do again, piece by piece. We find ways to preserve it now and for future generations.
Will this be on PBS?
Yeah, so the film is going to PBS. It'll be broadcast in the fall, so look for it in your local PBS station. I also encourage everybody you can go on the website, giantsrising.com, and if you want to organize screenings, for a community, an organization, a small theater, we're trying to make that happen too, because it's great to see it on TV, and we're super excited to have it be on PBS, but we love showing it in more immersive environments like the one you're in, and having opportunities to have these conversations.
Okay, Lisa, thank you so much for making the film and for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and the film.